to mention a player who's also playing during Mo Salah, let's move on to Sadio Mane, who at one stage in the season got quite a lot of stick for his performances. Maybe rightly so, because he wasn't brilliant at times. But my word, is this Sadio Mane of the season when we won it? Farrell, I mean, think about how incredible that player was when we won that. He was maybe our best, and yet it seems like he's been reignited in the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. I think, when we were all sort of dreading that period of the African Cup of Nations, I remember sort of thinking, oh, look at the games, especially if it goes over a few more sort of league games, we could be miles behind City. And then, as it turns out, for all intents and purposes, it has absolutely reignited, Sadio Mane. The Mane we're seeing now is probably peak Mane. I'm going to go back to that sort of that chip pass to Salah, because I mean, he was absolutely world class. It was one of the best passes I've ever seen in a football match. But I mean, even if we look at sort of his earlier of the season form, I think he was only a period of 7 games in the league with no goals or assists from him. I think between the win against Southampton and the loss at Leicester. Not great, obviously. You're not really what you want from one of your main men up top. But, the beauty, obviously, this forward line is if one isn't performing, one of the other two, if not both of the other two, tend to. And especially when you've got the likes of Diogo Jota and Bobby Firmino rotating, and it's not really ever a massive problem. But, it's things. I mean, looking at sort of the wider context of it, things just seem to be really clicking for Liverpool at the moment. You've got Thiago hitting form, injuries, which were, such a constant bugbear, last season and partly through this season, seem to be non-existent. We've got a fully, such a big, strong squad to the point that you've got commentators coming out saying City need to buy more players to compete with us, which is absolutely ludicrous, because not a few months ago they were saying we had a pathetic squad and City were years ahead of us, but that's obviously a side point. The Mane we're seeing at the moment is nothing short of world class, and the reality of the situation is that if we didn't have a player as ludicrously good as Mo Salah in the form that we had him at the start of the season, people would be taking more notice of Sadio Mane. He has been overshadowed, I don't think that's unfair to say, by the brilliance of Mo Salah, and people are starting to thankfully cotton on again to just how good of a player we do have.
Yeah, I think, David, there was times where we all thought he was still in his head. But let me tell you, his goal last night, he was not stuck in his own head. It was instinctual. That was an unbelievable finish with his weaker foot. And not just is his finishing that's been brilliant the last couple of weeks. It's his all-round game. He's been absolutely phenomenal. I mentioned against Man City in the league, he was our best player in that second half. Everything that we did that was brilliant came through him. He then goes and has an absolute joy against them at Wembley. He's had a fantastic game last night. He scored an unbelievable goal. I mean, Mane hasn't been spoken about as much as he should be, probably for his entire Liverpool career, but he was pretty much the first big signing that Jurgen Klopp brought in that you felt the tides were changing. You felt, wow, we've got a superstar here. And he will be remembered as a Liverpool legend, Rony, let's be honest. He scored 9 goals in his last 12. I think, is it right saying he's the second highest goal scorer, or is that still Jota? Is he third on this list? There's that many players up there for Liverpool.
He's only 2 behind Jota now, though.
It's a joke, isn't it? Our front forwards are just having an absolute great time. But is Mane right now the kind of the leader for this football club? I mean, we've got many of them all over the park, but it has felt in the last couple of games he's went up a gear.
It has, and the point you make about him being the first sort of flagship signing, he kind of started it all in a way. In that 16-17 season, he plays a huge part in us getting back into the Champions League, and then obviously the following season we reached the final. So it feels like that did feel like a launch pad, and I think you kind of hit on it there, Chloe. Like, we haven't maybe appreciated him enough throughout his whole career, and even like this season, and we've probably been guilty of that, or I've been guilty of that on here almost, as in not really talking about him too much. It's 9 in 12 now, like you say, and obviously there was the goals at the weekend, so it kind of boosted it recently, but maybe we should have sort of recognised the kind of form he was in earlier. And it's really interesting to see it kind of coming in this kind of central position as well. I think there's maybe an element there of, I think it might have been something I said last season, of as players get older, sometimes they can't hit the heights in kind of the roles they're accustomed to, and players have to evolve. And obviously we've seen Mane kind of dominate that left flank and wreak havoc from there for a number of years. But now we're seeing him almost like thriving in a central position, and you wonder if that's a way he can sort of prolong his longevity at the very top of the game. And that's sort of a really encouraging thing. And, what's interesting is, if you look at his numbers now, he's on to 19 goals, like I say. And in that sort of season he mentioned, that you mentioned, sorry, of 1920, when we won the league and everyone was saying, he's a contender for player of the year, he actually got 22 that season. So he's only a few short, and he could actually surpass that. And again, I think there was an element of performances as well. Maybe we're at their peak then, and he got 12 assists as well that season. But it's very interesting to say, and it was slightly surprising for me to see that he was closing in on that. But if you actually look at that season, I've got it up now, like his longest drought in the Premier League, he only had one drought of 3 games. Other than that, it was only like 2 games. So maybe we're almost seeing an element of kind of streakiness coming in now, because like Farrell mentioned, he had that drought earlier in the season, but now he's in like a really hot period of form. So it is interesting to see how Mane's game has kind of changed, but it's also very encouraging that he has been able to adapt, I think. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see, who kind of takes ownership almost of that false 9 role during this run in. But yeah, I've got to mention that pass as well. Obviously Farrell's spoken about it quite a bit, but I saw it obviously in person. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's a worldie of a pass, but I need to watch it on the replay to make sure. And it was even better, watching it through the television cameras. So yeah, an incredible piece of play from him, and the finish as well for the goal. Like, there isn't even, I don't think there was even that much. It was a good, pick out from Diaz, don't get me wrong, but don't even think there was that much pace on the ball. So it almost had to come down purely to accuracy. And yeah, it was one of his best taking goals all season, I think.
Yeah, it most certainly was. I mean, I think he's back to his best. There was a time there where, when we signed Diaz, maybe it was just the hype, but I wanted Diaz to start on that left wing, and we finally found a situation where Mane in his glorious form is up top.